radical responsibility. Like, I now like to think that everything is a choice.
Welcome to the Women Inspired Podcast, brought to you by Modern Well, a beautiful woman-centered collaborative workspace in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm your host, April Seifert, psychologist, entrepreneur, and self-proclaimed life experience junkie. Each week, I will introduce you to a different woman who is succeeding and inspiring others in one way or another. We'll dive into her story, her successes, failures, and the lessons she has learned along the way, all with the goal of inspiring you to listen to that inner voice who keeps reminding you that there is something you want to take action on. You are so much more capable and powerful than you give yourself credit for. Inside of you is a woman on fire. Let's let her out and see what happens. Here we go. Welcome back to the Women Inspired Podcast. My name is April Seifert, and I am your host. This week, you are going to meet a listener. I'm so excited. This week's guest is named Melissa, and she reached out to me through my website and asked about whether I would be interested in speaking to somebody who is very early on in their life design journey. And I was so excited to hear everything that she had to say. To give you an idea about where we're going to be going with this interview, Melissa is a physician. Now, let that sink in. She went to school for a very long time. She worked very, very hard to get into the career that she's in. And she's finding herself in the situation where she feels like there could be more. She could be doing more, adding more value. She could be getting more out of her day-to-day. And that's the exact situation that so many of us find ourselves in. If we're really being honest, we're not living as fully and vibrantly as we want to live. And that's the situation Melissa found herself in. And because of that, she is starting to create what the future will look like for her based on how she wants to feel each day, based on how she wants her day to look each day. She is making some seriously big changes in her life to align it around how she wants things to look and feel. And that is life design at its most beautiful. And I'm so excited for you to meet her. Now, before we launch into her interview, I have to say that this week's episode is sponsored by my absolutely free Life Blueprinting webinar that is coming up the first 2 weeks of January. I'll actually be hosting quite a few options. So hopefully there will be a time that you can find and fit it into your schedule. But just in time for 2019 to kick the year off right, I'm hosting a live, absolutely free life design, life blueprinting webinar. We'll go through my life blueprinting technique. I'll lead you through the entire thing. We'll talk about how to analyze it, and you will leave that webinar being crystal clear on the areas of your life that you want to work on in the coming year. This is exactly the situation that Melissa found herself in, and she's making amazing changes going forward, and you can hear how excited she is in her voice. So I'm really excited to offer this webinar for free to all of you who have been listening to me on this podcast. I cannot wait to connect with you on the dates of the webinar, first 2 weeks in January. If you're interested, go to aprilseifert.com/webinar for more information, or you can just click the link in the bottom description of this podcast episode on whatever platform you are listening to me on. All right, without further ado, I am so thrilled for you guys to meet a fellow listener named Melissa. Melissa, I am so excited that you're able to join us for this episode. Thanks for being here.
April, thank you so much. You have no idea how excited I am to be here.
Well, I'm super pumped too, because when you reached out, I was really excited about all of the info you sent me about what's going on with you, about everything that's coming up for you. And I just knew that you would make an amazing guest and that I had to share your story with other people. So this is awesome. Before we get going, let's start where I always start and help everybody get to know you a little bit. So just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a 39-year-old family physician. From a small town about 60 miles south of Chicago, and I now live in the Chicago suburbs. I've been married about 13 years. I have 3 dogs. I'm working full-time as a doc right now, and I'm in a place in my life right now where I'm kind of purposefully and proactively dreaming about my future for possibly the first time in my life. And I'm really excited.
That's so exciting. Okay, so you reached out to me. Gosh, maybe it's been about a month and a half or so now, but you mentioned that, I interview a lot of women who are sort of far along on their journey. They've kind of made it, their company's going, or to some extent they've been going on their journey for a little while. And you reached out and you said, "Hey, I'm actually at the very beginning of what is going to be a very cool journey. Would you ever want to talk to somebody like that?" And I'm like, heck yeah, because it's such a cool thing to hear from people at different stages. But also, what struck me as really neat about your situation is that you are taking such an intentional, thoughtful approach toward what your next steps are. So maybe we can start with like a general idea of what's going on and what is this shift that you see happening, and we'll kind of dig in from there.
Okay. Oh, so what's going on right now is I've enrolled myself in a life coach certification program with the intention of coaching physicians who were in the same position I was in several years ago. Kind of a feeling of what we're now calling burnout, although I'm kind of getting done with and tired of that word. But that sense of, what am I doing here? This isn't what I expected. This isn't the job I thought it was going to be. I'm not I'm not in the position I thought I would be at all. And I would love to help coach physicians through that, because I found a way to go from complete unfulfillment and dissatisfaction at my job to complete fulfillment and simultaneously dreaming bigger about things outside myself. And I love that concept, and I kind of love my life right now and who I'm becoming right now. And I'd love to coach other people through that. But with the bigger intention, even this big dream that I have no idea what that's going to look like, of trying to change the healthcare system, and be an impetus of change and a mover and shaker within it. But I think this is where I'm going to start. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
That's huge. So what I want to call out in what you just said for people who are listening to this, we're talking to somebody who's a physician, right? Like that's not something that you decide on lightly. It's something that involves a lot of training. It's something that involves a lot of work and a lot of time. And sometimes when we've sunk a lot of time and a lot of work into something, it can feel like, well, I have to keep going. Like I'm required to keep going because, there's this notion, we talked a little bit before we hopped on recording even, there's this notion of sunk cost where, wow, I've sunk so much time into this that I have to keep going. And you're a beautiful example of, no, you really don't. You really don't.
Yes.
You're allowed to make decisions and allowed to reevaluate how you feel, right?
Absolutely. And that's a huge part of what I've learned through this whole process is identifying what some of my beliefs are that maybe are not serving me well and holding me back, and challenging them. And where did that belief even come from? Like, why? Like, why do you have to pick one way? And no matter if you put 5 minutes into it or 50 years into it, like, why does that mean you can't change?
Yeah, totally. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that? I mean, I'll fully admit that as I started down this journey of starting the podcast and doing some of the work that I've been doing on my website and even the entrepreneurial work that I do outside of my website, there were so many doubts and so many beliefs that made me think that I couldn't do it, to the point where if the me who exists today were to meet the me 5 years ago, that woman would not recognize who I am now. And not to say like, look how wonderful and amazing I am. The point I'm trying to make is it's crazy what you can do when you shed those beliefs. So I'm curious about what some of yours were and how that shifted for you.
Well, oh gosh, there's so many. Let's see, to peel back. That was a major one right there, was, I'm a doctor. Like, that's my identity. Like, that's what I do. Like, just keep doing that. And after I realized that alone, like, maybe wasn't all I wanted to be anymore. Like maybe I wanted to be something different and identify as something different or do something, I don't know,
Yeah.
say bigger than that, but just different. So that was one, what we already talked about. But there were so many other ones that were holding me back from fulfillment in my job, which was even things that sound completely true, but they still weren't serving me well. Like the healthcare system is broken. The electronic medical record that I use is ruining my life, or or taking all my time away. Like just all of these thoughts that I let constantly go through my head were just leading to feelings of discontentment, and that were kind of keeping me in a little prison, like where I was,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of constantly floundering, and like, all right, well, if the healthcare system's broken and the electronic medical record's the worst, like I just have to keep trying to survive that, and that's
Mm.
it. Like there wasn't like space in my brain to think outside of that. Um, but in terms of other, like, I guess more personal beliefs that have held me back, I don't know, like, maybe I think it was just not even thinking about my future at all. So I don't know if there were, like, so many limiting beliefs, like, a couple years ago in terms of why I couldn't do something. I just think I didn't even realize it was an option. Like, it wasn't even on my radar. But now as I've been kind of, like, moving forward and moving through this, now that I'm like kind of more proactively thinking about the future, sure, there's some things coming up now that I'm challenging. Like even, you know, who's gonna want to listen to what I have to say anyway, right?
Mm.
What do I have of like value to give back to the healthcare system? Things like that that are just yeah, totally limiting thoughts, and old me probably would have just stayed with that and been like, oh yeah, you're right. You're right, brain. Thanks for telling me that. You're totally right. And so I will just like stay where I'm at and, not think about anything else. Um, but yeah, through some of these coaching techniques I've learned, I've just been able to kind of sit with it and recognize, all right, it's just a limiting thought. Don't gotta listen to it. I can keep using my evolved brain here and kind of just keep pushing forward and just sit with that discomfort, and it's okay. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah. There's two things that I want to call out, and both of them are kind of quote type things, but one of them, neither are mine, but one of them is you don't have to believe everything that you think. Like your brain just invents all this crazy stuff and throws it at you in a constant chatter throughout your
Oh
day.
yeah.
And I released an episode with Debbie Maldonado. It was like episode 91, 92, something like that recently. And that was a big point of her episode, is that you are not your thoughts. You're not the same as your
Yes.
thoughts. They're just things that are happening in your mind, and you don't have to believe them or entertain any of them. You can just sort of be like, okay, well, that's what you're giving me. Great, moving on. So that was
Yes.
kind of one. And then two, you mentioned using your evolved brain. I truly, truly believe that your brain and your mind can be your best asset, absolute best asset, or your total biggest barrier, just depending upon how you're using it and what you're allowing it to do. So I adore that you're taking this intention step toward making it an asset of yours, or like worst case scenario, reducing its ability to be a barrier to something that you want to move forward and want to do, because man, it can just get messy in there sometimes.
Yes, that's I've experienced so much mess up there. It gets kind of wild sometimes, but yeah, that concept, like to way oversimplify, obviously, but that concept of like, all right, I've got this caveman brain that has running the programs that it knows to kind of keep me alive, and those tend to be the negative, like hold you back kind of programs to, in theory, keep you safe, keep you alive, keep you where you're at. It's what you know. And then this evolved brain that can think about the caveman brain, that can think about the future and be more proactive and purposeful. And it just helps me to have that visual when things start to get messy up there. It's like, oh, yeah, this is just caveman brain, just doing all it knows how to do. And that's okay. It's kept me alive. It's kept our species alive. And, in a do or die situation, maybe I can like let it run on autopilot and do its thing. That's fine. But I don't
Hmm.
have to like sit and listen to it all the time.
Absolutely. One question I have for you is around when was it and what was it that helped you make this decision to make a shift? Because for big things like changing careers, ending major significant relationships, moving geographically, big changes like that are ones that can be really difficult for people. And one of the biggest things that I find when I hear from people in those specific areas and other really big ones like that, it's this notion of just brutal self-honesty that can be so hard. Like, even if you're not ready to tell somebody else, like, wow, I hate my job, or holy cow, this, marriage isn't what I thought it was, or I despise living here and I need to move somewhere else and sell my house and do all of these things. Like, even if you're not ready to tell other people, even being honest with yourself can be really difficult sometimes. So what was that like for you to come to terms with that and start to decide that you were going to make a change?
Yeah. So interestingly, like that concept of totally coming to terms with myself was not directly related to the job or career change. It was because I had been kind of thinking about other jobs and careers for since I was in medical school, actually. Even in medical school, my then boyfriend, now husband, went with me to an interior design school because I, on a whim, was like, you know what, maybe I'll go to interior design school instead. Like
Wow, I
two and a
love
half, two
it.
and a half years into medical school.
Yeah.
Um, and then throughout the years, it's been, from just fleeting thoughts of, well, maybe I'll just change the type of doctoring I'm doing, or maybe I'll open a coffee shop on the side. And then, several years ago, I had loved CrossFit for a period of time. I was like, well, maybe I'll become a CrossFit competitor, and like just all these like passing, like fleeting thoughts. And then, and it wasn't until, gosh, probably about 2 years ago when I when I totally realized that I actually didn't trust myself at all. And that was like, I think the most brutally honest thing that I could come to terms with and realize I wasn't okay staying in that spot that helped move me forward. Because like my brain has just kind of been a wild, wild west up there for much of my life and just kind of going wherever the wind took me and just whatever felt good and right at the time. That's just kind of what I did. And I was like, man, I don't like trust myself that I can like trust my brain and what it's like suggesting to me. And so anyway, around that time is when I started suspecting, because as a family physician, I treat all kinds of conditions, including ADHD. And I was like, you know what? I've had these same symptoms that I'm treating in other people for my whole life. And
Mm.
it just never occurred to me it was possible I could have that, having gotten through school and holding a great job down. And I had even talked to my husband about it, who's amazing and this brilliant guy. And I've like trusted him so much, like for my whole life, and I still do. But I trusted him and other people above my own opinion. And so talking to him and a few other people, they're like, "There's no way you have that. Like, you couldn't be functioning how you are now, like holding this job down if you did." And I was like, well, why do I feel like I can never get my shit together ever? Like the adulting thing is rough. So anyway, so I ended up finally realizing I have to trust myself to get this evaluation. Like I put off getting that evaluation for probably a year and a half, just trusting what everyone else is saying. And
Mm.
anyway, so that was the huge impetus of change was like, no, like go with your gut, like trust your whatever. Like maybe you do, maybe you don't have it, but this has been on your mind for years. Like go find out for yourself. You don't have to, listen to everyone else. So, and that was a huge turning point. And then I did end up being diagnosed and treated for it. And that actually has been a huge changing point in my life too. That has changed my life dramatically. Both the medicinal and non-medicinal treatment for it, and I'm pretty grateful for that actually.
That's amazing. That's so amazing. And big things like that. Obviously, there's an aspect to this that is very unique. Where if you've got something like ADHD that is clouding the way that you're thinking or making it more difficult to think through something as complex as a change like this, that's a
Yeah,
huge, that's a huge challenge to get over. But even just the notion of our health changing or being reminded that we're not guaranteed the health that we have, that can be, a really significant catalyst for people to start to make changes. And I think it's really cool that, you're in this position now to be able to start creating a different future than what you've had. And it sounds like you've mentioned you've been questioning this for quite a while. So obviously there's something there that you either want something different or maybe something more. Maybe it's not that you want to completely cast off what you're doing, but maybe there's an aspect to it that's not quite right and you want something more. And I think it's so cool that you are intentionally going after it because it's not something that everybody does. I'm curious about your where did you come up with the confidence and the belief that you actually could make this change? Because I hear from people from time to time who reach out to me on my website and they feel really out of control. They feel like they don't have control over the situation. Well, I can't because and insert the thing there. And it could be, I can't because I'm married. I can't because I don't have a spouse. I can't because I'm too old/too young or have this job or my commute is long. There's always something there. And to some extent, I'll hear from people who have issues on both sides of the coin, like they're opposite issues of each other. Like somebody will say, I can't do that because I don't have a spouse. And the next person will say, well, I can't do that because I have a spouse. It's so funny. What was it that made you feel, or tell me a little bit about how you're feeling in terms of how confident you are that you can actually create a future that is different than what you've had in the past?
That's a great question because how I'm feeling can totally change like day to day or even minute to minute. But I'm able to manage my thoughts and my mind better such that I can keep creating confidence when I wanted to need it. And so overall, like I am feeling confident right now. And a lot of that is I'm confident in this process and journey I'm going through, even more so in the need to hang my success or value or worth on any particular outcome. Like I do have like outcome goals of, I'd love to help like physicians get to a feeling that I'm at now of like having fulfillment without changing the circumstances and being able to open up your mind then to think of other things to do. Like I'd love to help other physicians be fulfilled now so that they can also start creating change within the healthcare system as opposed to just trying to survive. So I do have these like overarching things I would like to achieve, and they're very exciting to me. And thinking on those help keep me excited and help keep me motivated. But at the same time, like I don't have to like check off any one particular aspect of those goals to know that I did a good job or to stay confident or be confident, because as I'm going through the process of just becoming the person I need to become to even think about creating some of these goals and results that I would like to reach, that in and of itself is such an amazing journey that I know even if I don't hit the exact goal I have right now, that there's going to be something else that I'll do. Like that goal could evolve, but right now that's just the target that's keeping me moving and changing and evolving to be a person who can make change and reach goals and whatnot. Um, so I'm able to create confidence now, but was I previously? No, like this is all very recent, like very recent for me. Like really, I mean, I can't believe how much I've changed in the past 6 months. Like you were saying how April of 3 years ago wouldn't recognize April today, and I feel that way too of even 6 months ago and 12 months ago and a year and a half ago, and just seeing like a human being myself like evolve in real time is like so cool to watch and think about. And I have to remind myself of that if I ever start getting caught up in the doubt and which I do, of course. There's the doubt comes up and fear comes up and all of the anxiety comes up, but I can look back and see how I've evolved and then continue to look forward to who I'm going to evolve into to achieve anything else. But I think like back to like what helps create that feeling of confidence, though, is a concept that I think I've heard you say multiple times on the podcast, and it's that radical responsibility. Like, I now like to think that everything is a choice. So if I tell myself, like, I can't do something because I'm, because of, well, because I'm married, or because I don't have kids, or because I don't work for a certain employer, like, I have to say, no, that's not the cause of why you can't do something. You're choosing not to do something for whatever reason, and then you better like your reason for that. So I'm trying to
Mm.
make everything like a choice. Even, I can't work out because I don't have time today. No, you're choosing not to work out because you're choosing to prioritize this over working out. And do you like your reason for that?
I like that second part. Holy cow, I love that. I mean, like how many times I've barked about the notion of radical responsibility on the podcast. It's near constant. But I love the question that you asked about, do you like your reason for it? Because oh gosh, what book was it? Mark Manson's book, maybe. There was a book that talked about the decisions that we make are all about what are you willing to do and what are you unwilling to do. And if you start using that verbiage as instead of saying, well, I can't because blah, 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 say I'm unwilling because ... So I can't work out today
Yes.
because I don't have time. I'm unwilling to prioritize working out over grocery shopping today. That's
Yes.
fine.
Yes.
Like whatever. So you made a
Yes.
choice. That's okay. Everybody has to make choices and trade-offs. But I love that extra layer that you added to it. Do you like your reasons? Holy cow. That's awesome. That's so good. That is so good.
And this isn't this. I can't take credit for these ideas, right? This is stuff that I've like learned from people I'm calling my mentors and coaches. You being one of them, April, is awesome. But yeah, that's just a concept that has helped me so much. It's all a choice, radical responsibility, and to me, that's very empowering. Like, I don't see that as like a pressure or negative or a shaming thing. That's just empowering. Like, yeah, I've got more control than I think. Like, there's so much in this world that we don't have control over, but I do have more control over my actions, my choices, my thoughts, my mind than I used to think I did. And that's very empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. A funny experiment on that for people who are listening to this who work in a traditional 9 to 5 cubicle type of situation. I'm not going to admit where I did this, but every once in a while, I would have one of those weeks coming up. I could see it coming. That was just crazy. I mean, completely bonkers nuts. And I knew I wasn't going to get even a breath in my week if I didn't do something about it. I would literally schedule myself for a meeting that I would hide the details from on my calendar, but I would book myself for an hour so that my calendar was blocked off. It looked like a legitimate meeting, and I would not be at my desk because I needed 5 seconds to regroup. I needed that time in order to be able to even keep going that week. It's not like I did this, all day, every day, but every once in a while, that's, the emergency handle that I would pull. I challenge anybody in a cubicle setting, just do it once and see what happens. Like, people would try to book meetings with me then, and they would end up booking around this time. And all of a sudden, I had a glorious 60 minutes where I could sit and regroup and get a couple of things done and get through my inbox or something, whatever it was that was making me anxious. That's one tiny example of, wow, this is crazy. Holy cow, this feels out of control. How can I take a sliver of control back? Like, what can I do? And in the design world, the human-centered design world, the question you ask is, how might we? How might I take a sliver of control back? Where is it and how do I do it? And the word might is so powerful there because, number one, people get into that situation that you and I just talked about, right? I can't because. We're not saying you're going to. We're just saying you might. You might do it. So just cut yourself a little slack. Use the word might. Calm down a little bit and think it through. The other thing that it does is it doesn't close you down to only one option. Again, you're not saying this is the way we're going to do it. You're just saying this is one way that might work. What are some ways that might work? So I would challenge people, if you're in a cubicle setting, book yourself for a meeting and go hide somewhere for 60 minutes if you have to get some time back. Like take a sliver of control back. But the next time you're in a situation where you feel like, wow, this is really constraining, or I feel like I don't know what to do, ask yourself that, how might I? Like, how might I take a little bit of control back and fix this situation, even if it's just a sliver of control? That little bit of momentum, holy cow, that just makes such a huge difference. You can't even imagine the momentum that you get from just a tiny little decision to take some control back. So that's the challenge I want to issue to people as they're listening to this right now. Friends, I am interrupting this podcast episode to ask you some very important questions. How joyful and aligned does your day-to-day life feel? Do you feel driven and passionate? Do you feel truly alive, like you're actively and intentionally participating in your own life? Or are you sort of just going through the motions? Are you working for the weekend, and going to work and coming home and passively letting life happen to you? The hard truth is that you don't have the luxury of time to waste. When I was in graduate school, I was doing just that, going through the motions. It all changed one day. After having lost my dad to cancer and having battled the blindness and paralysis of multiple sclerosis myself, I asked myself an important question. What would my dad give for the day that I just wasted? What would I have given when I was blind and paralyzed from MS? What would I have given for the day that I just wasted? From that point forward, I began living with intention, urgency, passion, joy. I began living by design, not by default. And I want the same for you. Because of that, I'm offering an absolutely free life blueprinting webinar during the first 2 weeks of January, just in time for the new year. During this webinar, I'll guide you through a life design experience that combines the powerful fields of psychology and human-centered design. When applied to your own life, the techniques that I've been developing can help you gain clarity on the areas of your life that you want to change and begin to steer your life into alignment with who you truly are. I've kept this information and these techniques bottled up for way too long, and I'm so excited to share them with you. Stop over to aprilseifert.com/webinar to register, or just click the link in this episode description. Remember, you are either living by design or you're living by default, and you get to choose. Join me, and I'll teach you the techniques that you can use to live like your life depends on it, because it does. I want to start talking a little bit about where you're going now. How are you thinking about, because you're literally making this up as you go along, right? Like you could decide you're going to coach doctors, right? You could decide I'm only going to coach surgeons, or I'm going to coach family practice people, or I'm going to do one-on-one work only, or I'm only going to do group work, or I only work on Fridays, or I don't know. Like you could literally make this up to fit any parameters you want. How are you thinking about what boundaries you're setting up, or the framework that this new life needs to fit in?
That's a great question. And that is a huge part of why I'm pursuing this. So I'm thinking about, as I'm going forward and what I'm going to do with this coaching, I'm thinking about definitely like what the need is, like what's the problem out there, and what solution am I coming up for it? But I also find myself thinking on, well, how many hours will my clients expect me to be available? Like how many, like almost starting to like schedule myself based on what I think will make someone else happy. And I have to remember, like, wait a minute, like I'm doing a lot of this, and a lot of what I'm learning is taking more control back of my life and purposefully creating the life that I want. And yeah, and that is like serving other people. That's a huge part of my mission. I would love to do that. But I also want to do it within the framework of my priorities, which are being able to schedule in rest time and have plenty of time with my husband and my dogs and my extended family and my in-law family and my family of origin, and and working out, and maybe some other hobbies I might develop on the side. Maybe I want to dabble in piano or like working on a foreign language and things like that. And I want to be very purposeful about the global look of what I want my life to look like as I go forward. So that's been kind of a push pull and like a little bit of a struggle for me, because I do tend to slide back into, well, how many hours a week do they expect me to be available? I need to make sure I do that, instead of just creating from what I know I want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that notion of alignment is such a huge deal. It's alignment, and what you're talking about here is so perfectly life design, right? It's me thinking about, or you in this case, thinking about, you are the center of your life. You are the human at the center of your life. You have strengths and you have desires. And desires, by that I mean, there are feelings that you desire to have on a daily basis. In your case, I want to feel valued. I want to feel freedom in my time. There are certain things that we desire and, strengths that we have and goals that we have. And if you're going through this process of really intentionally creating your next future, it's a great idea to think about what those strengths are, what those desires are, what those values are, so that if you're going to be the one making it, just make it fit within that. Make it align to the things that you are truly good at, the things that you really love doing. Now, obviously, like, people have to pay bills and you have to do some of the things that aren't as fun, but can you minimize those? So those aren't the majority of what you're doing. The majority of your time isn't spent doing things that don't leverage your strengths or things that don't create the feelings that you want to have on a daily basis. That alignment, notion is so stinking important to this type of work. And I love that you're thinking about it. And I love that you caught yourself in a situation where you're immediately going back to other people and what they would expect of you, because it's such a habit. I mean, we are trained to operate that way. So it's amazing that you caught it.
Yeah. And if I could share one other reminder that was huge for me recently in the same area, Michelle Obama just released her book recently, Becoming. And I haven't finished it yet, but early on, she talks about how her and Barack had some big decisions to make, and they made some decisions that went against the grain of how they would spend their time with, when he was still in as a state senator, and how she would spend her time as a bigwig, I think like a hospital organization. I don't remember which job it was. And they made decisions that totally were like against the grain of what other people would have expected. And other people told them, this is going to be a career killer for you. Like, this is completely dumb of you to do this. But they still stayed aligned with their values and still were able to create the life that they wanted. So anyway, that was just a good reminder for me too.
Well, and in that case, you're talking about a senator, right? A state senator. You're talking about somebody who, I'm assuming she was in law of some sort, in whatever job that was. But you're talking about people who are creating space and time and organizing their time and how they spend it around things that they value. People who are operating at an extremely high level, right? How you spend your time, say, okay, we have the holidays coming up. How you spend your time over the holidays and small decisions about whether, heck, I dare people, when you have family at your house, take 20 minutes and go chill for a second each day, right? We're talking about 20 minutes, one time, no big deal. Like, those small decisions, we feel freaked out about making choices that would set us up well, let alone the situation that you just described with, people who are extremely powerful and their time is extremely valuable. Like, put it into perspective, like, take your 20 minutes, like, go take a break. You're okay. Like, we aren't even willing to do that. We just think it's so critical and so important. The world's not going to end. Like, it's totally fine.
Yes.
It's probably going to be totally fine. I love it.
Love it.
I love it. So as you think ahead, you mentioned earlier that you've got an enormous goal. You want to change the healthcare industry. And what I like about that is that you're stating something that I sometimes call a moonshot goal. Like, you're stating, a massive goal that's out there. And maybe you'll get there, maybe you won't. But it snaps a line, right? Like it gives you a direction to go in. And that's what I really love about those goals. Tell me a little bit more about that goal and how what you're doing right now is kind of pointing you in the direction of it.
So, what that even looks like, changing the healthcare system, is so vague and nebulous to me. Like, it's not at all concrete and defined. I don't know what that looks like. But my purpose of choosing that is one, it would give me a life mission that I would be proud of. Like if I look back, if future me, is looking back and, what do you think about how you spent your life? Like I like the idea of that having been a mission of mine. And two, I think that nebulous goal is just serving me well to help create the emotions I need to continue along this journey. And that's mostly excitement. Like I kind of love feeling excited. And when I think on that big, truly like impossible seeming goal and dream, it excites me. And when I realized that that was the case, I just kind of held on to it. And I was like, just use that as your target, use that to create excitement. And it'll unfold as you go along what that's going to look like.
Amazing. I love it, love it, love it. And you're totally right about the emotions that you want to have. Sometimes I talk with people about motivation is such a sticky thing with me. Largely, I think that motivation is something that is so fleeting and isn't something that we can always control. Instead, what I think we can control is the notion of momentum. So if you can get a routine or something, and in your case, it's thinking about this amazing goal, and there might be other aspects to it, but a routine or something that gets you going, that gets you in the right mental state, that gets you excited and firing on all cylinders, something that takes you from static. And you could do this in the morning if you have a hard time getting up in the morning, or mid-afternoon if you have a hard time continuing on with your day at 2 p.m. when you're starting to crash. But whatever this sequence of events, for me, I've got a playlist on my phone that does it, but takes you from feeling kind of like stuck to the point where you're back where you want to be. That process can change the way that your day feels. Like you can get yourself back to that set of emotions exactly the way that you're talking about by thinking about this goal. And then it helps you keep going. And it's something that, again, is under your control. You get to create that, mental state in yourself. You can create it out of nothing. And you're not sitting and waiting around for, motivation to hit or for you to feel motivated one day. You just make it happen by putting yourself in that state that you need to be in.
Yeah. I realized long ago that motivation is totally fleeting if you're just waiting for it to come. So it's finding that what works for you to create emotions that could be similar, or maybe you can create motivation with thinking thinking a certain way. But it's finding what works for you, because I totally know this thought would probably not work for a lot of people, because I could see it being like overwhelming. Like, what does that even mean? What is that? How would I possibly change the healthcare system? But I don't know, somehow for me, it's like just clicked with my brain. Like I like having an impossible goal and it keeps me excited. So that's what's worked for me. And maybe someday that won't even be the thing that works for me to keep me excited. But I now know that like I can change that if I need to, because I can create that feeling of excitement in another way if I need to. But for now, this is working fantastic, and I love the mission of it.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So way too many people feel stuck. Way too many people are moving through life just kind of letting it happen to them. They're definitely not active participants and intentional participants in their own life. They feel unfulfilled. People write me with the question like, hey, I got married. I thought that would make me happy. I got the job that I thought would make me happy. I'm successful and blah, blah, check, 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 check. And I'm still sitting here wondering if this is all there is. Like, is this it? This is what I'm supposed to do? What's your advice for those people? Because you're like doing the thing right now. I mean, you're turning the corner and creating something different. What's your advice to people who feel like that?
I have a couple thoughts on that. And one is finding fulfillment right where you are, like not expecting a circumstance to change for you to feel better. And that was a huge turning point in my life when I learned that that was an option and when I learned tools to help me do that. I mean, to me, that was the key. Like once I could find fulfillment in the same job that I was unfulfilled in, nothing changed in the circumstance. But once I was able to do that, then my brain space like totally opened up to think on other things beyond survival mode and beyond what I wasn't happy about. So that was huge. And the other good thing I've learned is if I think I want something else because I'll be happier there, then I want to really put myself in that other like me like situation, like really put myself there and think, well, what am I doing? How am I thinking? How am I acting? Like what's different about me in that situation that I think is going to make me happy? And then create that now.
I love it. Oh my God, that's so good. That is so, so good. This has been amazing. I have loved hearing just the thoughtfulness and the passion behind this change that you're creating. And for folks who have listened to me for a little while, you know how passionate I am about people deciding to take responsibility and create their own next steps and take control. And this is such a beautiful example of somebody who is doing that. And I absolutely, absolutely cannot wait to see what you create. And I hope that once you have this in place and once you have this tangible business or whatever it happens to end up being, up and going, I hope you'll stop back and fill us in on how things are going.
I would love to, April. I'm pretty excited about that. Future me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Honestly, this has been amazing. It has been awesome hearing more about your story. And I really appreciate you, being open to talk about things before they've really materialized, because that can really freak people out sometimes. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Really. I mean, April, I love like what you're doing, and I love to even be a small snippet of that. But I also love that just the act of doing this and talking to you, and even the email I sent to you to reach out in the first place, was really taking me outside my comfort zone.
Aww.
And that used to hold me back. Like that, me of a couple of years ago, if I felt uncomfortable, I just wouldn't have done it. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity, even to just continue to stretch me further so I can keep growing. So thank you. And thank you for what you're doing.
That is the perfect way to end this episode. Thanks so much. I really hope you guys were as inspired by that interview with Melissa as I was. She is absolutely doing exactly what I ask all of you guys to do every single week. She's being brutally honest with herself and about her situation that she's in. She's taking responsibility, and she is creating the next steps that will happen in her life aligned around who she is, her strengths, and what she wants her life to look and feel like. Oh my God, that is life design at its most perfect. And obviously, I'm going to hammer in on those three notions. So here we go. Complete and utter honesty. It can be so difficult. It can be so hard to do. We mentioned it a little bit during this interview, but especially when it's a really big decision, something like a relationship or a career or a big move, it can be so difficult to be honest about whether or not you're feeling as happy and fulfilled as you could be or as you want to be. But that step, that initial step of really getting honest with yourself, and I'm talking like really honest, like I've had 3 glasses of wine, my inhibitions are low, I'm like really honest with myself. That's what I'm talking about, being brutally honest with yourself about how things feel now and how you want them to feel in the future. It's really difficult to do, but it's absolutely critical. I want you to borrow some confidence from Melissa and do that for yourself. Does your life, whatever aspect of it comes to mind right now, does it actually feel the way that you want it to feel? Just be honest with yourself. And if it doesn't, let's move on to the next. I love how she talked about trusting herself and taking responsibility for creating her next steps. It was so interesting how, she was saying around her ADHD diagnosis, even how she was trusting other people's opinions and listening to what they had to say over her own gut, over her own intuition as a physician. But when she started trusting herself, and she started taking responsibility, radical responsibility, 100% responsible for 100% of the situations you find yourself in. She took radical responsibility for her own situation. Doors open up. You all of a sudden can start to take control over even the tiniest of aspects. Those of you in a cubicle, I dare you, go do what I suggested. Book a little bit of time for yourself and give yourself some breathing room. And in any other situation in your life, whatever the analog is, like take a little bit of control back. Take that radical responsibility and figure out what are you going to decide to do. Decide, and then keep that promise to yourself. And the last thing that I want to hammer in and talk about a little bit more is this notion of alignment. So Melissa was really forthcoming and said, yeah, I'm the one setting up this business. I'm the one putting this together. And I'm finding myself slipping back into the pattern of setting it up in a way that other people will be happy with versus thinking about how she needs it to feel. And this is especially critical going into a field that she's talking about going into. And this is likely the reason why so many physicians burn out. You're in a field where you're providing a lot of value. You're giving a lot of emotion and empathy and passion from yourself, and that can be exhausting. You absolutely need to think about what the framework and the boundaries are for what something like that needs to look like in order for you to do it well. How does it need to look? Do you need breaks? Do you need to limit the number of clients you take on? Maybe you only take on certain kinds of clients because other ones are completely draining to you. It's those questions that you really have to think about as you're designing what your next steps and what your future will look like. And that's another aspect of being honest and taking control. And I adore that Melissa was doing just that, and that she was willing to admit that she slipped up a little bit, but she's getting back on track. Like I said, I really hope you guys enjoyed this interview. This is such a great example of somebody who is at the very beginning of their journey, who undoubtedly will go on to do amazing things. I mean, she's accomplished so much already in her life, and I have no doubt that she'll go on to do amazing things and accomplish every goal. I mean, heck, if the healthcare industry changes, it's going to be due to her. But in this stage, in this starting stage of thinking about how she wants it to look, I love that she was willing to come on and be honest about where she's at now and how she's thinking about creating the future. That is life design at its most perfect example. Now, before I close out, I want to remind you one more time. First 2 weeks of January, I'm offering a series of webinars where I'll be taking you through my life blueprinting tool. It is such a powerful tool that combines the fields of human-centered design, design thinking, and psychology to help you gain clarity on 4 important aspects of your life and determine where you want to focus and where you want to make changes in order to do your own life design. Make your own future, align your own next steps around you and your desires and your goals and your strengths and what you want your future to look like. I'm so stinking passionate about this stuff. I can't even tell you, and I'm so excited to start to take all of the information that I've been collecting and all of these techniques that I've been developing and give them all to you. I really, really hope you'll join me on one of these webinars. You can go to aprilseifert.com/webinar for more information and to sign up, or you can just click the link in this episode description on whatever platform you are listening to me on. Thank you guys so much for listening this week. I can't wait for coming weeks. We have amazing women coming up, amazing supplemental content that I'm planning on releasing coming up. I hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you next time.
Before we close out today, I want to say thank you to my producer, Cameron Hill, and to my incredible sponsor, Modern Well. If you want to learn more about how you can reach your goals in a one-of-a-kind work-life community, visit www.modernwell.co. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who might benefit from this inspiring message. And if you have a moment, click the link in the episode description to leave me a rating and a review on iTunes. It would mean so much to me. Finally, I want to remind you that it is absolutely possible to live a happy, fulfilling life, even in spite of all of the chaos and demands we all experience. Sign up at aprilseifert.com to gain access to tools that will help you do just that. I have carefully created and curated a set of tools that combine the powerful fields of psychology and design thinking to help you intentionally create a fulfilling, happy life you love. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and until next week, stay inspired.